A Markie Scenic Showman'S engine. This is part 3. A curious problem with the steam ports. And what's wrong with the steam ports? Well, have a close look. I think there's been a bit of a problem with this engine at the factory when they machined the steam ports. The right hand side one is far wider than the left hand port. Now I've cleaned up the ports, you can see also that the slide valve isn't in the centre of the port face. I don't really know what to say about this, it's not something I want to get involved in. Rectifying this problem would be time consuming. The entire cylinder would need to be removed from the engine, and I wouldn't like to get involved in doing this job because of the time and cost. I really don't know how a cylinder machined in this way passed quality control at the factory when the engine was originally built. At least the mystery of the uneven valve timing is solved, and I will continue with the job I was asked to do, which is make the engine work. The original problem that the owner was having with the engine was it just wouldn't work. There was a lot of limescale in the boiler and the water gauge, so I talked him through using some Kilrock K kettle descaler to get rid of all this. But even after the kettle descaler removed all the limescale, the engine still was reluctant to start. This is a very common fault I find with model steam engines. Here is the disassembled steam chest, the slide valve is on the left and the valve rod is on the right. The normal problem is that the slide valve is made too tight to fit on the driving block, and even though this one doesn't appear too tight, when I lift it up in the air, the slide valve remains in position on the rod. I have to shake it loose. It's a simple but sometimes long-winded fix because you have to take a lot of parts off the engine. I'm just using a needle file very carefully to enlarge the part of the slide valve where the drive block fits. I didn't show it in the video, but when I turned the slide valve's drive block over, it was quite a tight fit in the slot in the slide valve. So as well as using a needle file on the slide valve itself, I cleaned up the block too. And now, whether it's a dry fit or covered in steam oil, the slide valve still falls off the block. The steam oil is very sticky, so on one occasion it didn't fall off the block, but don't forget, when this is in the cylinder, the temperature of the incoming steam will make the steam oil much less viscous. But to be on the safe side, I removed a little bit more material using the needle file. And to repeat what I've repeated many times, for a slide valve to function correctly, it must have some float on the drive block. It is, after all, only the steam pressure that holds the slide valve against the ports, and often, on smaller steam engines, you have to suddenly open the regulator, and it's this sudden inrush of steam into the steam chest that slams the slide valve against the ports, but this cannot happen if the slide valve is a tight fit on the drive block. Once again, I've covered this topic in some depth. In my videos, I have mentioned this problem frequently, but I still get viewers writing in asking me the same old questions. I would recommend each and every viewer who's not sure about how things work to watch my video series Steam Engines for Beginners. Or if you are a Patreon supporter, you can download for free my Complete Guide to Miniature Steam ebook, which contains a lot of useful information. After thoroughly oiling all of the parts, the port face and the slide valve, I refit the steam chest and all the other parts to the engine, and then before refitting the cover I apply even more oil. Being very careful not to let the screwdriver slip, I retighten the bolts that hold the steam chest cover in place. The marks on these small bolts are none of my doing. Someone's had this cover off in the past and over-tightened the bolts when they've screwed them back in place. This time the engine starts immediately, and even though the timing's not 100%, it's running a lot better. The steam or air admission is earlier at each end of the stroke. I think I can slightly improve on this by adjusting the eccentric. It's still a bit of a rattler and it's blowing slightly because I can't adjust the slide valve properly. This is the mechanical lubricator, and the top was almost impossible to remove unless you did what I've just done, which is to use a Stanley knife blade. The bottom part of the cap that fits in the lubricator is machined round. To fix this, I just carefully filed some flats with a needle file on the round part, and now the fit is much better. I'm just having a feel at the big end, and there's quite a lot of side slop on this, which probably contributes towards the rattly sound. But as this is a brass engine and brass does not wear well in a bearing capacity, I think I'll leave the big end just as it is. There isn't that much wear on it anyway. Even though the slide valve has a bit of a blow at one end of the stroke, possibly due to the machining of the ports being wrong, It runs okay. It's not exactly going to pull you around the garden, but this type of traction engine isn't designed to do that, and besides, the lack of a differential makes it difficult to turn. Yes, it's tweaking time. I'm going to try and tweak the valve timing to as near perfection as possible. And now with the valve timing advanced slightly more, the engine runs a lot quieter. That's running a lot better. Here's some slow motion. This engine has a rubber drive belt and it's broken. I'm going to rejoin it like this. It's simple to do. I've used a piece of 400 grit wet-to-dry sandpaper and I've chamfered both ends of the belt at opposite sides. All I need to do now is stick the chamfered parts together using some super glue. This type of angle joint will be very strong. Within 10 minutes of doing the job, I fitted the belt to the traction engine, which is now driving the generator, and when I fit the canopy back in place, all the LEDs light up. And please note, to generate for the canopy lights, you need to run in reverse, in exactly the same way as on my 4.5 inch scale, very large Burrell Showman'S engine. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back, making it unnecessary to comment that the videos are too short.